What is up, everybody? Brian Mendler back in your life on this brand new year, January 6th, 2020. And I am super excited today to be joined by, I will call you the pride of Canada, a man who is a legend in the field of education. And I'm excited to get to know you much better. The myth, the legend, George Couros joins me. How you doing, man? It's good to see you.
I'm good, man. This is pumped. I love the intro, so it's pretty cool. I don't know if I'm the pride of Canada. I think we got Celine Dion would be a good one. Wayne Gretzky, pretty amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
honored to be here, Brian.
Well, I'm a fan of both of those two. You know, I was gonna say it was you or Gretzky, but the thing is, you have the hair, man. It's the hair that makes it. You know, and I mean, I wear my hats all the time because I'm bald, but you got the hair. And on social media, I mean, it's like I don't know how you do it. I mean, you go the shower look, and then you kind of brush it back. It is. I'm jealous, man. I have to tell you, I am jealous. You never lost your hair, huh? Any part of it at all, or it's always been solid the whole way?
I think when we had a daughter, I got some stress spots, and I then as soon as I got those, I grew it out. I'm like, they're gonna be covered somewhere. So yeah, I get Canadian hockey hair jokes all the time. So I was actually in Wisconsin, and my hair is a lot longer than it was now. And these kids, I was speaking to students, and these students came up to me, and all they said was "Flow, bro," and it was like the coolest thing I've ever. I was just like floating all day. It was just the funniest thing.
Do you do a lot of that? Do you talk to kids? I know you do a lot with staff development for adults. You do some with kids as well. What do you do with them?
Yeah, so I actually do quite a bit of stuff with students. I talk about digital leadership, so something I've been talking about probably for about maybe 9, 10 years. And I think a lot of times when I go talk to students, they'll say like, "Hey, this guy's coming to talk to you from Canada," because I do this a lot in the U.S. And he's going to talk about social media. And it's the second the kids hear that, they immediately start groaning. And the reason they groan is because a lot of times an adult comes in and we'll talk about social media and they'll say like, don't do this, this is horrible, this is bad. And then, I mentioned some stuff, like I talk about like cyberbullying just really briefly and stuff like that. But I talk about here's all the opportunities that you have that I didn't. And they'll come up to me and they'll say like, that's the first time an adult has actually ever talked to us like that about this topic. And so like we still acknowledge that there's bad stuff as there is with anything, right? But really try to empower kids. And like Brian, let's be honest, a lot of people know you and I because of us taking advantage of these opportunities, sharing our voice. And I think for probably both of us, neither of us really ever thought that anyone would know anything that we said. We just wanted to share stuff that was happening, in our school and things like that. And so we're just trying to be purposeful in helping kids really create some of these opportunities for themselves. And so, yeah, that was actually the presentation that I was doing. And I think when an adult talks to them, that not only encourages them to make an impact on the world, but actually is using the same stuff that many of the kids students are using, but more for like just for fun, which is great. I'm not against that, but saying like, hey, there is opportunity here. So I think students really appreciate that.
How did you become so literate with social media and with technology? I mean, has that always been your thing in your life? Have you always been interested in that?
Not like, to be honest, and it's funny because I actually would not even say I'm good with technology. I would actually say technology now is so easy to use that a lot of people look really good at it. Like if you I actually think when I was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old, we had an Apple IIc, and if you wanted to use that, you had to be good with technology. Like you had to know programming, coding, like little things like that, just to make something happen, right? And so basically, it became so easy to use that a lot of people, have gravitated and started using this, and they're not like, if you asked me to take apart a computer, I could totally do that. I just could never put it back together. I have no clue, right? And so I think for me, when I first started teaching, I had just a little touch of experience using technology on something I did extracurricular. I made a website for our student council. And that at the time was so far advanced for what people were doing with technology that someone just saw that on my resume, and I applied for a kindergarten position and was asked to teach a high school technology position because they couldn't find anyone to fill that void. And I accepted the job because it was super hard to get a teaching job at the time. and I'm actually in this class with these students, and I know maybe like a fraction of a percent more than some of them. And so really, I think the big thing for me was that I learned a lot of technology from my students, but I actually really learned to learn from my students in that time. And so I've always, because of that one job, led to another job with technology involved with it. But really, I've really, technology is, to me, is like picking up a pencil. It's not something that I really think about now, but I know people that, do really amazing things with technology that I would have no clue. And I think for me, it's really about that it really pushed me to learn, because, you're using this software for this podcast. And the reality of it is you could go tomorrow and all of a sudden it's totally different, and you got to adjust, you got to figure it out. And so really my focus from using technology is being open to change and really trying to take advantage, because change happens all the time with tech.
And you're right. I mean, really, it's become so easy to use that it's almost, I mean, like for this, I hit record. I mean, it's what I do. I set up a couple lights that I bought on Amazon and a microphone, and here we go. And I love that about this. I mean, one of my favorite, I tell people sometimes, when I was a kid, I always wanted to have my own radio show. That was one of my dreams in my life. And when I got out of college, I applied for different TV and radio jobs. I wasn't in education, right? I went back for my master's in education, and I got denied from a bunch of them. And what's really cool now is nobody has to give you a show anymore. I mean, now here I am in my basement with my own show, and nobody can say no to that. And literally anybody can. My 7-year-old the other day was like, "Dad, what kind of podcast can I do? Is there anything that I can do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like let's think of something. You can. How about reviewing books? Like he reads tons of books." And I'm like, "How about you go on and start to do a show for kids where you talk about different books and what's good and what's not good, and we can do it all right from here," which is just so fascinating. And what's amazing too to me is that the technology the kids are using right now is the worst they'll ever have. They'll never have worse than they have today, which is, it's almost scary to think about when these kids are our age, where they'll be. You said what I wanted to tell you is I worked at a school recently where, at a conference where you were the day before me. So you were the first day keynote, I was the second day keynote. And I was talking to somebody there, and they had said they had seen you before, and that they had their kid with them at your presentation. And at first their kid, who was in high school, was like annoyed, "Oh, I have to sit through this." And then you started talking, like the whole time, I guess their son was just nodding, yeah, and looking at the mom going, "That's what I've been trying to tell you like my whole life." And so I wanted to ask you, like, what is that? What specifically are you saying, other than technology is great and you have opportunities? What specifically are you teaching these kids to get them to go, "Yes, that's the thing I've been saying my whole life, Mom"?
I had no clue until you just told me that happened. That's like incredible feedback. And actually, one of the things that I really try to do, because I do have the opportunity to speak to staff and faculties, teachers, administrators, and if there are students there, I always say, "Hey, I really want you to come into my talk. If you could be there, I would love to get your feedback. Am I on the right track?" Because that's who we serve, right? Like ultimately, at the end of the day, I want to know what the students think of what I'm sharing, and that's kind of a norm, the feedback, which is great. And it's something that I really pride myself on. And so I think, kind of goes back to really talking about empowering students and giving them opportunities. Like, you gave a beautiful example of you having, like a radio show that you've just created and no one can say no to you. And that's the opportunity that exists for our students. And one of the things that I say all the time, and it's almost like I'm almost nervous to say it, is that my goal is not to get every kid to college. My goal is to help students find success in a way that's meaningful to them. But and we're probably around the same age, when we were kids, you were told, if you do not go to college, not like, I'm not even talking trades, I'm just talking, we're talking like university, post-secondary institution, that you were going to end up being a loser. And I do not believe in that. And I think that there are just a ton of these opportunities. And so I actually use a lot of student examples to really bring home my point of the work that I'm doing and sharing, so that students are in there watching kids do the stuff that I'm talking about. And it's, there's definitely, like, there's opportunities like for entrepreneurship, But there's, like social entrepreneurship, right? Where students are using their platforms. One of the examples I always use, Marie Copeny from Flint, Michigan. Probably at 8 years old, I think she started using Twitter to bring attention to the Flint water crisis. And a lot of people really started paying attention when she started talking, because when a kid talks, adults tend to listen, right? And so really just saying, like, the idea is that we're not developing kids to only lead tomorrow. We're giving them opportunities to lead right now that are meaningful to them. And I think that's a really important aspect of it. And so I think students, when they hear me, they walk out feeling empowered that someone is saying, yeah, I'm behind you. I want to make this work. It's not all about academics for me. And I say this all the time, that some of the smartest kids in our schools are terrible academically, but do they come to school feeling that their gifts are valued and that we're tapping into them? And so I think that's really probably why the students resonate with that. Is it's not just about academics for me, although that's, that's a part, and it's something we have to always work within, and that's okay. But I think there's a lot of ways you can still empower students within that framework.
I agree. And I say that all the time. I mean, the trades are a huge, thing. And it's like, why don't we push more kids to that from an early age even? And, I have a good buddy named Kevin who's an electrician, and he makes like $46 an hour. He's in the union. He just put a pool in his house last year. His buddy did the concrete. He did the electrical. They did the pool. It cost them basically nothing. This year they're doing the other guy's pool, right. And I'm sitting here like, we had when we were in school together, we had a principal. He and I kind of got in a little trouble together, and we had a principal who, so Kevin, I got a call from him recently, and he was like, hey, Brian, he's like, and it was on my voicemail. He's like, listen, he's like, just so you know, I got a call, and it was a side job, and it was our former principal's house. And he's like, just so you know, at 1 a.m, their house is going to blow up. He was totally kidding. He's like, but who's in charge now? Cause he's like, I can do wires, and nobody touches wires. And I mean, he's got all this power. And I mean, it's so incredibly important, I think, for kids to find what they love. And that's the key really in life, is finding what you love. How did you find what you loved? How did you get into education, and what's your story? Where'd you grow up, and how did you grow up to get to where you are now?
Well, actually, I didn't really want to go into education. I've always loved kids. I wanted to be a dad since I was probably like 12 years old. I don't know if that's a weird thing to say, but I was really interested. I'm a big basketball guy, really wanted to coach, and kind of floated around. And I think this is probably one of the reasons that I kind of think the way I do. I went to 4 years of university and came out with a degree that wasn't going to help me get a job at all. But I went to university because I felt I had to go to university, right? Like that was part of what I was doing. And I joke, but it's kind of serious. I actually, I saw Billy Madison, and I'm like, that looks fun. And so I decided to train to become a kindergarten teacher. And I would say for about 7 years of my career, so the first 2 jobs I had, I liked teaching, but it was like, okay, it was like a job, right? It wasn't really for me. And I wasn't like the kid who grew up like dreaming of having their own classroom and all these things, right? Like a lot of teachers, and that's awesome that they found that really young. And I went to another school, and I went to this school, and it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to give this one more year. I'm going to give this one more year to see if this is something I want to do. And I had this principal, her name's Kelly Wilkins, and she just changed everything for me, put me in positions where, I was successful, felt like that I was really contributing to not only my classroom, but the school community. And it's just amazing because I know it wasn't just like that. She did that for George. She did it for everybody. And within, like, I was going to quit teaching, gave it one more year. And then all of a sudden the 1 year with her, I became a vice principal in another school, which I never would have ever imagined. And then 2 years later, I became a principal. And then, I've spent the last, I think, 14, 15 years basically being either involved in education at the district or school level or speaking. And I'll tell you, I think for me, it was really having that one person who saw things and really empowered me, that really inspired me to do what I was doing. And I always feel bad when people don't have that experience with a leader or, a colleague or something like that, that really shows you your own value when you don't even see it. So that really changed everything for me. And and I reference it all the time. I'll tell you, when she didn't just change my teaching career, she changed my life, and very grateful for it.
Do you, not to put you on the spot, but do you remember anything specific from that she did? Any like tangible thing that you can be like that you can pass on to anyone listening that they could do for culture or climate or leadership?
Yeah, I list off 100 things, to be honest with you. Because remember, if you remember earlier when I mentioned about, being charged in technology. So first of all, when I got hired there, it was really interesting. It was a really interesting hiring process. They had a teacher that left, or I think was on a maternity leave or something. So there was like a 1-year opening. And so instead of saying, hey, we want someone who teaches grade 7 math, which is what that person did, they said, we're looking for a middle school teacher. And what was really interesting about the interview process was their mentality with it. And it's really shifted my thinking. They weren't looking for someone who could teach grade 7 math. They were looking for the best person they could find. And they would look for people that would bring something that maybe they didn't have in their school, right? And so when she met me, they saw some voids that I could fill immediately, even though that subject was not actually my subject to teach. And so when we went through that process, they started shifting some of the other people's jobs, because they'll say like, hey, we have this guy, he's not really a math person, but is there anyone else who would like to, to do this? But this person's going to take over some technology stuff. And so I was I can't remember the job title, it was like the technology lead, something like that, right? And basically first week, she gives me the schedule where I'm in each class for half my time for 40 minutes a week. So I'm with grade 7 kids for 40 minutes. I'm with grade 8 kids for 40 minutes, whatever. And I'm supposed to like get them doing technology in a meaningful way, which reality is not a good process, right? So I have no job security. I have no, there's nothing guaranteed basically within like for a month. And so I go to her because I felt comfortable saying this. I'm like, this schedule is not beneficial for kids, right? Like we're just doing technology as like an activity, but we're not really doing anything meaningful with it. What would it look like if I actually spent like a week or two with a class and worked with their teacher and did this? And she said, hey, you're the expert. That's why we hired you. You change the schedule however you like. And so I'm a teacher, not in an administrative position, and all of a sudden I'm changing the schedule. And with technology, there's a lot of issues with technology in the school. And she came up to me at the end of the year and said, hey, what would you buy? I'm like, that's not really my place to say what would you buy. And she's like, it is your place because you're the technology lead. I'm like, oh, I've never run a budget. And that little thing where now I'm making the decisions as a teacher for what's happening in all the school. Now I can't complain like, oh, this sucks, because I've actually made the decision to purchase it. But she said she counted on the person that she brought in with the ability to actually make decisions, which gave me so much more ownership over the school as a whole. And so I just like little things like that. And like I said, I gave you like 3 things just off the top of my head. I could go on and on forever about how she really gave me ownership through that whole process.
One of the things that I teach teachers to do with difficult kids that are misbehaving in class is, I talk about 5 reasons kids misbehave, and 2 of the reasons, they're almost kind of the same thing: power and control. A lot of times kids misbehave because they just want to feel power. They want to feel like, oftentimes somewhere in their life, they're completely out of control. And so they want to feel that power, or sometimes in their life, they have complete control. Some kids go home and their parents basically let them do whatever they want. And so, they play video games all night. There's no one checking in on their homework. There's nobody holding them accountable. And so they feel like they're in control, and then they all the time. And then they come to school and the teachers try to take it from them. Right. So either direction you look, and it sounds a lot like that's what she was doing with her teachers, was giving you guys that feeling of power and control, empowering you to make decisions, which I just think is so powerful. And I don't know why, and maybe you can shed some light on this, why that is not the norm. I feel like why I feel like as teachers, we're used to telling kids things, right? Sort of like, I said, sit down, versus, come here, buddy. Why do you think it's okay to stand instead of sit? Right. And like when you approach it with a question, or with the mindset of trying to empower another person, I feel like you get so much more buy-in. And I think it's at all levels, right? So it's at the level of administrator to teacher. And I think it's also at the level of teacher to kid?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about it from the aspect of administrators, because I agree with you that this doesn't happen all the time. I've talked about this kind of spectrum where we're talking about there's a certain level, like we want confident leaders, and there is this fine line between, you know, being like unsure of yourself and actually going to the other side of being arrogant, where you believe. And I think a lot of times, like I believe, I don't believe I'm the person that knows all the answers to everything. That's why I hire people who think different than I do, right? I don't need someone who thinks like me. I need people who bring different strengths to the table, but that's not threatening to me. And so there's a certain confidence of this, but where, you know, a lot of times on that spectrum, if you're not confident in your abilities, you start to undermine people, or you start to try to grab for more control, and take it away from the people you serve. And when you go to the other side of the spectrum, the results are the same, but maybe for different reasons. You have that arrogance where, you know what, you don't really know what you're doing. I'm in charge here, so I'm the one who's making the decisions. And so I think when we really develop the confidence of our leaders, they are more willing, because it doesn't make me look bad to have other people excel in my school. In fact, as a leader, if we really think about it, when other people excel in my school, it actually makes me look better. And I think that's one of the things you have to be comfortable with. Is this is one of the things I've always challenged and I absolutely hate, is the idea of why can't you be a prophet in your own land? Like, why is that such an issue? And I think it's a lot of time it's insecurities that if that person is doing something really good, somehow this makes me look bad, where really we should be elevating the people across the hallway, but we often elevate people we don't know for whatever reason, but we don't want to do it. I think that confidence level really matters.
I agree. And I think it takes a special leader and a special person to be willing to make everybody else look good. And really that's the goal. It's kind of like being a point guard on a basketball team. Your goal is to make everybody else look good, right? If everybody else has really great games, you can kind of, you don't score a ton of points potentially, but you set everybody else up. And I feel like and really you're running the show. You're at the top of the key. You're kind of the eyes and ears on the court. And I feel like that same mindset can work really well as a leader of a school.
Yeah. And I think like, I'm not going to pretend, and I'm sure you'd admit the same thing. Like, we both have egos, right? We want to do well. And I think for leadership, what people disconnect with is that when I get other people to do well, that is me doing really well as a leader, right? I might not get the critical acclaim, I not get all the attention from this, but that it will look very well on me when other people that I help and I serve do well with my leadership. And I think that's something Kelly Wilkins, who I mentioned, my mentor, principal, she has left such a legacy in the school division that we had, because she just empowered so many people who are still doing incredible things because of her. And like, she gets a lot of credit now, but she'll never take it, which is fascinating to me. But that's not her style. Her style is really helping other people do their best. And I think that's something we look for in leaders and teachers, right? Like, if kids do really well, it's kind of like the teacher, you know, bragging how, you know, hardly like half of my kids fail in my class. It's like, well, maybe you're not a good teacher if that's happening, right? Like, we should be doing things where we want all our kids to be successful, right? And I know it's not always on the teacher, right, to do that, but when you're bragging that kids fail because my content's so hard, you have an issue.
Right. I mean, the goal should be success. The goal is how successful can I make my students? And look, of course, it's not always teachers, but you know, I think it's critical that people look in the mirror. I mean, I'm very open about the fact that I'm in addiction recovery. And the number one thing that we learn in addiction recovery is that every time that I have a problem with someone or something in my life, I'm a big part of the cause of that problem, me. And when I got to recovery, I always believed everybody else was the problem. When I was a kid, when I failed the test, the teacher was stupid. If I got cut from a team, the coach was an idiot. If a girl didn't like me, she was clueless. That was always my mindset. And then I got to recovery, and basically they held up a mirror right in my face. And every time I would complain about something, you know, I would say, oh, that person was offensive. And they'd say, right, but did you have to get offended? I mean, just because somebody's offensive doesn't mean you have to get offended. Getting offended is about you. Offensive is about someone else. Control yourself. And it was like this crazy mind shift that happened. But But from that moment, from the time I got in there, I feel like I live a leg up in the world on a lot of people, because I mean, in America, we're brutal about this. I mean, look at our politics. All people do is blame everybody else. I mean, people just, bash each other. And instead of, I say it would be really cool if, if sometime you'd have the Democrats in one corner and the Republicans in another, and instead of meeting in the middle of the ring and looking at each other on the walk there to fight, they looked at themselves. And by the time they got to the middle of the ring, they'd fight to say, I'm sorry first. And, I think that's an important lesson for a lot of teachers. It doesn't mean you're the problem. It just means look internally, because often that's where the solution lies. The solution lies with us changing ourselves, changing how we approach a kid, changing the assignment that we give, being flexible, being willing to differentiate for one kid based on their struggles and their needs compared to somebody else. And, I think some of us struggle with that. I see pictures of your daughter. I have a daughter saying, I think Kaylee's 5, right? Kalia. Sorry about that.
It's spelled unique. So yeah, she gets Kaylee all the time.
Kalia. So she's 5?
Oh, no. She's just 3. Yeah.
She's 3.
She's probably the height of a 5-year-old, but she's 3. Yeah.
She looks older than 3.
Yeah. She's a tall kid.
Nice.
And tall parents.
The love of your life, obviously. What is she 100%. Into now? So my daughter's 5. She's been dancing. My daughter's into dance, gymnastics. What does she do?
She's really into dancing. She loves singing, but yeah, it's cool. Like, one of the hardest things about the work that I do is I'm gone from home quite a bit. And that's tough, right? I have like really different time. Like, I don't see my daughter every night when I get home from work. I see her for like a month straight. I'm just home all the time, right? And it's cool because like I play guitar. I'm not very good at it, but as soon as she'll just come in there and she wants to play guitar. So I bought her a guitar, and she'll sit there and play with me. And, she has no idea what she's doing, but it's just cool. She's really into basketball because I'm into basketball. It's cool because she's like a crazy Raptors fan. She'll say like, let's go Raptors, because of the Raptors winning the championship last year. So yeah, it's really cool. And I really like, I really like what you said about the responsibility. There is actually, and this is something we're really trying to teach our own daughter too, right? I know she's 3, like these lessons will come later, but the idea is that if we're being honest, some people are just terrible, right? Like I'm not saying they're terrible, like they're terrible. They do terrible things to you, right? And that happens. And kind of what you're saying is really important. And it could be 100% someone did something to you that is their fault. But I actually control what I do, right? And I can control how I react to this. And this is something that we talk about with schools quite a bit, is that when I hear principals saying things like, oh, our teachers aren't buying into this. And I'm like, okay, well, what you can control is what you do. So maybe you're the issue. Maybe you're the issue in how you're dealing with this. So how do you change your approach? And some people, the reality is that I'm just going to just say the things that I say all the time, but louder now. And that should change, as opposed to changing their approach. And so I think that, yeah, there's times where it's just how we react to this. And something we really work with our daughter is that you always can control how you react, even when something negative happens to you. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean that it was a good thing to happen to you in the first place, but we have to figure out ways to deal with this, because that at the end of the day, I have to live with myself too, right? And, like I said, bad things happen, and I'm not condoning them. I'm not saying it's okay, but what I can control is how I react and what I do and my response to it.
I feel like a lot of people think classroom management, the definition of classroom management is kids, sitting still, doing what they're told, paying attention. And what I say to teachers is, I believe the definition of classroom management is managing yourself at all times, always staying. It doesn't mean sometimes the kids might be totally out of control. And under my definition, you might still have great classroom management because you are controlling yourself. And sometimes you're going to have a class that's difficult and kids are defiant and disruptive. And can you step back from that situation and just sort of look at things and try to remain calm and figure out which ones do I need? If I could get that kid on my side, that kid can control 5 other kids. And so I need that one more than they need me. Okay, let me create a plan for how, and this might all be happening while kids are, being inappropriate or rude, but that versus, getting into it with kids and arguing back. And fighting with them. It's constantly managing me. And look, it's hard. It's hard as an adult. You know, this happened a couple weeks ago. I was doing a workshop in Champaign, Illinois, and I got down to the thing and to the room, and my office is supposed to send books for me to sell. So the books go directly to the place, and they weren't there. And of course I immediately got annoyed, and I call my office, and I'm like, you know, talking to the girl who did it. And then, you know, and then I hang up and I start thinking to myself, you know, under my own definition, it's my fault. Like, it's the books didn't come. It was my fault. What procedures do we have in place? What protocols do we look at? How do we make sure and ensure that this doesn't happen? And it starts with the leader. And it's so easy to jump on someone else in situations. And, you know, and in school, especially, and this is why I get frustrated a lot in the States with different behavior programs. You know, one of the things I say to schools when I go to them is I say, do you guys have a referral form? So do you guys call it a referral form in Canada, like where a teacher can write a kid up? Is that what they are there?
To send to the office or
like where a kid's misbehaving, send them out. They call it a referral form here, where you quote unquote write a kid up.
We're pretty much, we do a lot of the same things you do.
Right.
We're right beside you.
So I know. So above us. So one of the things I say to them when I go is I say, I have a question about your referral form, and I say, does it have a spot on it that says what the adult did wrong? And 99% of the time the answer is no. And I say, what about a spot that says what the adults could do differently next time? That's on there, right? And they say no. And I say, well then, in my opinion, you should throw it out. And again, it doesn't mean, I want to be clear about this, it doesn't mean the adults are frequently the problem. It just means I never looked in the mirror until I was forced. Right? That's addiction recovery forced me to look in the mirror. And I feel like a lot of us need to be forced. We need some outside presence to say, here's the mirror, look in it. Because left on my own, I'm not good at looking in the mirror. I'm good at blaming other people. And when I do that in the school, it's like this eye-opening moment where people are like, yeah, I mean, and I look at the administrators, I'm like, you're not even asking your teachers to look in the mirror. Like, why would they if you're not going to ask them? And without that component, I don't care what other plan you put into place. It's a key. It's like getting on an airplane and before you get on, you notice like 10% of the wing is missing. You're gonna be like, I'm not getting on that plane. I mean, yeah, but the rest of it's intact. I know, but a key part of it is missing. And if a key part of it is missing, then the rest of it is flawed. You know, how many nights are you on the road generally away from your family? I know the feeling, by the way.
It depends. It's probably, probably about 200 days a year I'm gone from my home. Yeah. So the one thing you're saying, Brian, I thought is really important. And this is actually a really big turning point for me, because when we used to have students that, might have some behavioral stuff in my class, I think honestly, I think I spent, my first 2 years, I think I spent a year of that crying at home, right? Like, why, what am I doing wrong? Like, why does this kid hate me? Right. And I think that's my like third or fourth year of teaching. We had a speaker actually come out to our school, and they said something that, I don't know, it's just like one of those things that just sticks with you and you never forget it. And he said, never let an 8-year-old wreck your day. And I was just like, what the heck? Like, I've been doing this forever, right? Like, this 8-year-old said something to me horrible. He swore in class, and like, I'm a terror, and it really stuck with me. And, a lot of times, and I know I've seen a lot of your work, Brian, and I know you see this, that, a lot of times these kids, when they're acting out, it's not you, there's something else going on. There's something happening, right? And there's something connecting. And I remember this one time when I was principal, we had a program where students, like from other schools, if they were like severe behavior stuff, we had a special program for them. And so there's like a smaller classroom, there's about 8 students in there. And this one student was having a really tough day. And this is a kid I had built a really good connection with, that always got along with, but he's just having a day, right? And so the teachers called me and they said, can you come? We need some support here. I'm like, yeah, I'll be right down. So I went down there, and this kid was just swearing, F this, F that, F this, right? And something happened, right? And this is like, school had been all going 2 minutes, right? And so he starts going at me, who I've always got along with this kid, and saying how much he hated me, it was my birthday too. I'll never forget that. It was actually it was literally my birthday. And I was like saying to him, like, this is my birthday, right? And this kid had a good sense of humor, but this moment he's having this rough day. And he said to me, I'll never forget, he said, he's 12 years old, and he said, do you know all my friends, and he used the F word, he said, effing hate you. And I just said to him in the moment, I said, well, I actually have all the 12-year-old friends I need, so I'm good. And he held it for a second, and then he started laughing. And then I'm like, hey, are we good? Like, can we just, like, let's talk about this. Now, like, obviously it was not okay that he was swearing at myself and the teacher, and we had a conversation about that. But I worked with the teachers after who were amazing. Just amazing, the stuff that they dealt with and how resilient they were and how they didn't take it personally. And I think that one day we were just talking, like, something happened today, right? Like this could happen, and this is not to take it personally, but I think that was for me was a big turning point. And when I was principal, one of the things I used to do, because I really wanted students to hear themselves, and I know you're talking about kind of referral forms, when kids would be sent to my office, I would just say, there's two things I'd say every single time. I'd say, why are you here? And I would just wait for them to talk. So I wanted to take some ownership over what happened, right? And ownership over whatever happened in the classroom, in the playground. And I'd wait forever if I had to. I would just sit there, and because a lot of times we'd say, hey, I know you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. And the kids just thinking you're a jerk. They don't really care what you have to say, and all they're focused on is you're a jerk. So I let the kid talk. I want them to hear their own voice. And once they kind of go through that, the follow-up question, they know I'm the principal, I said, what would you do if you were me? And they were a million times worse on any of the consequences they had. And the whole purpose of that was I wanted the student to take ownership over what they had done. And I also wanted them to solve the problem themselves. And I think that's really ultimately, it's not about the pound of flesh, that idea, it's about helping this kid in this moment to develop a skill that actually helps them later in life too, that they're taking ownership, they're finding out, how do I solve this, how do I make this? And it wasn't like there's no consequences, and believe me, there's a lot, I can share a lot of great stories, but I could share a ton of times I struggle with this stuff too. And, I was having a bad day and I took it personally. Yeah. But I think for me, that one speaker really, that one moment really shifted a lot of things for me, because I was taking everything, I have control over the stuff I do, but a lot of stuff that happens to me in school is not about me. It's about something that's going on at home, something that happened on the playground, something else that happened. But it's the same thing. Like the people that we were closest with were usually the hardest on. Strangers were great too. And these kids love these people. They know that sometimes they push the boundaries because they know that that person's going to have their back. And so that's why they're having that moment.
No question. And one of my favorite bullet points that I use in my seminars is, if you can hear what kids are saying without listening to how they're saying it. So sometimes what happens with challenging kids is their how gets in the way of their what. Their what is actually quite intelligent, but their delivery is so bad. Like, they're so bad, this lesson sucks. Like, when a kid, nobody thinks that that's an appropriate thing for a kid to say to the teacher, I don't think. At the same time, what I always say to the teachers is, look, you guys, just do the basic math. There's 180 days in a school year. You teach middle school or high school, you're teaching 6 to 7 lessons a day. That's 1,040 lessons a year. Some of them are going to suck. They are not always going to be great. And like, sometimes it's okay to say to the kid, you know what, buddy, you got me. You got me. Like, I thought there was going to be a snow day today. I literally was planning for a snow day, and I screwed this one up, and my superintendent never canceled school, and I was planning a lesson for this class. And then I went on Facebook and I saw the district next to us was closed, and I saw the one across the street was closed. And I was like, all right, we're going to get the call any minute. Then I went and started watching Netflix, and dang it, I woke up this morning and we had school, and you got me. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. The kids will laugh. Like, who wouldn't laugh if you do? Right. Just tell the truth. Now, that said, in that moment, then you can say to the kid, by the way, buddy, the next time, instead of yelling that lesson sucks from across the room, it's so much better if you just come up to me and kind of get in my ear and be like, Mr. Mendler, admit it, man. Come on. Like, seriously, how much work did you put? You're on our case all the time about us giving you 100% effort. What about you? Don't we deserve 100? And I'll listen to you. Not only will I listen to you, but you'll get what you're asking for, which is really the ultimate goal. But really what you said, it's always about teaching, right? It's always about whatever situation you're in, whether it's you're in an office as a principal with a kid or you're in a classroom with a kid, it's always about teaching. And sometimes it's about teaching the lesson that you planned, but frequently it's about teaching the lessons that the kids bring you. And I say this all the time. Like, I believe we get so caught up in our lessons that we plan that we often miss the lessons that kids are handing us on a silver platter. Like, kids are walking in all the time saying, I ain't gonna do nothing today. Perfect. Let's start with that. I ain't gonna do nothing today. What did he actually say, guys? Well, he actually said he's gonna do something, because if you ain't gonna do nothing, you're gonna do, like, you can turn that whole thing into a phenomenal grammar lesson. Or you can say, we don't talk like that in here. Like, which one do you pick as a teacher? And I think that's kind of what we were talking about earlier when we're saying to look internally at ourselves, is how do I respond in every situation? How long were you a principal, or were you a principal?
Yeah, I was a vice principal for 2 years, and then principal for 2 years, and then I was pulled to central office to work with the principals in the school. So it was really, really rewarding, awesome to see the impact you have, and the owners, the thing that going back to Kelly sharing about her influence on me, I really tried to make sure that people had that same ownership over the school that she gave me. And I felt it as both vice principal, and yeah, it was a really powerful experience. And the one thing that you said, Brian, I think really stuck with me is sometimes owning, that we make mistakes, that we're not having good days. And I actually, I don't know if people really know this about me. I used to ref basketball, and I used to ref pretty high level basketball. And if you think kids are bad, wait till you coach, because they don't care about what your day is like. They'll yell at you if they don't like something you did, and you have to deal with it while you're out of breath running. And I remember one day, one game I was reffing, a game was a college level game, and I was not calling any fouls. Nothing seemed to be happening in the space, and I felt like, oh geez, people are gonna be looking at me like I'm not doing anything. So I made a call, and it was so bad. It was so terrible. And the coach just starts yelling at me right away. I said, Coach, I'll talk to you first time out. As soon as you call it, as soon as there's a stop in the game. So he calls a timeout, because he's like, hey, I'm going to use a timeout to
right then.
Yell at this guy. And so it's a 3-person crew. And there were other 2 refs like, do not go over there. Because they actually knew. They didn't want to tell me I screwed up. But they're like, knew like whatever this person was going to say, it was going to be deserved at the moment, right? And so I go over there right away, and I'm like, no, I'm good. So I went over to the coach, and I said to the coach, there's no reason to yell. That was a terrible call. I apologize. It's not going to happen again. And he just looked at me. He's like, all right. And I'm like, you wasted the timeout. You know that, because like I'm not arguing with you. And I'll tell you the credibility that I had with that coach, because I could just admit, oh, you're right. That was a terrible call. And I think that go back to the thing that we talked about earlier, that confidence level is that, yeah, sometimes we do screw up. Sometimes we do make mistakes, and we own it. I'd rather I own it than you tell me about it, right? And I think that's part of it. And I think that shows, as you said, we're always teaching. That shows something to our students too, right? Like that. And one of the things that I say to people is that as educators, it's not just enough for us to learn. We have to model our learning. We have to have students see us struggle with things sometimes. Students see us when we fall down, how do we react with it? Because we're asking kids to take risks and try different things. And so I think it is that vulnerability that we have, and the confidence to continue to move forward in a positive direction, I think is essential. And I just loved how you said, that we're always teaching.
Always. I used to work with a colleague who used to walk around the school, and she would say that she had a phrase, and she would call it ABT, and ABT stood for always be teaching. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. It's a salesman and it had ABC, which was always be closing for sales. And for here, it was ABT, always be teaching. Just teach them. If they don't know how to say please and thank you, show them. If they don't know how to talk appropriately, show them. You can get annoyed or you can show them. She would say that all the time. The other thing she would say is, if you just listen to kids sometimes, like sometimes it's so healthy to just listen and to listen with no expectations. In education, we have this thing where we always talk about high expectations all the time. And I believe in high expectations most of the time, but I think sometimes that gets us in trouble, because I mean, if you're constantly expecting really high things, then you're easily disappointed sometimes. And I think occasionally it's good to just have no expectations with kids, where you just come in and you sit down and you're like, you know what? I'm just grateful you're here today. And whatever I get out of you today, I'm good with, and even if that means you come in and you put your head down and you do nothing for an entire class, there's always a place for you in this classroom, and there'll always be a spot for you. And I believe that at some point, even though your head's down, your ears still work. So you're going to hear something that's going to get you to pick that head up. That said, it's cool either way, but I hope you choose to pick your head up. But if you don't, I'm good with you. Versus pick your head up, pick your head up, pick your head up. Do you need to go to the nurse's office? Is that where you need to go? I mean, one of them usually gets a kid to buy in and the other one doesn't. By the way, I have a question. So as an official, this is a serious question. Do you now actively look for a makeup call or not? What's the truth on this? Because you screwed one up. Do you look for a makeup call to give that back?
No, you just make sure you don't miss any. That's you don't. If you miss one after that, then you're in trouble, right?
But the next close one has to go to them, though, right? Like you got to kind of have that a little bit in your mind. No.
Nah.
All right.
Probably some do that, but yeah, it's you just want to make sure that you're calling it fair and consistent, right? And when you screw up, like I said before, if you screw up, just own it and move on. People, if you argue with you when you screwed up, good luck.
I was watching you last year during the Toronto Raptors run, and I was very envious because I don't know how you do it, but you were like one night you were in Toronto at the game courtside, then the next night you were in Golden State at the game courtside. So how has this happened? How do you do you have friends? Are you have people that play for them? How do you have the connections that you have? I mean, you got to have somebody. You're not just buying tickets, are you?
Okay. So we're gonna get into this. That was the luckiest couple weeks I've had in my life as a basketball fan. So I was able to see, and this actually, like, maybe of interest to anyone who likes sports and wants to go to sporting events. So I just happened to be in Toronto I was on my way to an event, and Toronto was my layover, and I begged Air Canada, and I fly with Air Canada so much, can you give me an extended layover so I can leave in the morning? And so I happened to be in Toronto for Game 7 of the Philly-Toronto series, which was the Kawhi 4 bounce shot, best game I've ever seen in my life.
Unbelievable game.
And then I was also at Game 5 in Toronto, and weird thing again, I was actually coming home from an event and had to fly through Toronto to get home, and so I just happened to be there for Game 5, and then I was at Game 6 when they won. And I just happened to be there for a speaking event in California. So none of those days were actually planned.
Get out.
But the trick is that I always go to games by myself, and I'm okay. I'm the guy who sits in the movie theater by himself because I really want to see this movie, and I'm on the road by myself all the time. And so if you wait to the last minute, people will sell their tickets for way under the price because they just want to get rid of it. So you just gotta be patient, right? And yeah, it just worked out. I got great seats and because I literally waited to the last minute and just knew something would pop up. Because if you wait till right before the game or even when the game starts, you can get in for almost next to nothing. And because it's one seat left over. It's just, I guess it's a perk of not having friends, I guess.
Dude, I gotta tell you, I was hoping for a better story. I thought you were gonna say something why is my long lost cousin, and now, I'm glad he's with the Clippers. I'm gonna show up in LA. You'll see me courtside frequently next to Jack Nicholson, at some point, and none of that. So you're actually buying tickets. I'm the same way, by the way. I think when you travel a lot, you just get used to doing stuff by yourself. Yeah. My headphones are my best friend, so I'm with my headphones all the time. People wonder, they're like, do you wear your head? And I literally, in all my video, everything, but it's that they never come off, because if I don't have them, I'm always listening to podcasts, and I'm always listening to music, and I live a roller coaster life, and I don't know if you can relate to this. I'm guessing you can, but it's a lonely lifestyle. It really is. I mean, it's amazing. Let me be clear. It's this roller coaster. It's kind of like you do these presentations in front of all these people, and people applaud. It's not real life. I say this all the time. People applaud for you and they tell you how great you are, but then it's then it ends, and it's like you're on your own. You're by yourself. You're in an airport. You're, and you're literally alone. And the thing I miss most about full-time teaching is the camaraderie. It's the other teachers. When I go to schools, I miss that. I see that, like, especially like during holiday time where you see them just kind of doing their Secret Santas or their whatever they're doing. And I kind of look at that and I'm like, that's one thing I definitely miss more than probably anything else. You ever feel that way?
Yeah, it's for sure. And the weird thing is, like, I totally understand that because I'm quite introverted as it is, and which is surprising to people because I'm comfortable speaking, but I think the thing that people get mixed up is a lot of introverts. It's not that they can't be around people, they don't like talking. It's just, it does different things for their energy, right? And so the headphone thing for me, I wear them in the airports, whether I'm listening to anything or not. And it's kind of my, like, I don't want to talk to anybody, right? Because I'm like talked out for the day. But, I definitely miss that. But there's actually, I don't know. I know you're close to the Canadian border, and I don't know if there is this show on TV, and this is the analogy. And I'll explain the show. There is a show called The Littlest Hobo, and it was about a German Shepherd. It was like the weirdest thing. And this German Shepherd, every episode would just show up in some town, and then it would, like, something would happen, and then the German Shepherd was like helping the community or whatever. And then that German Shepherd, like, made everything better. And then at the end of the episode, the German Shepherd would just walk away. They're like, I wonder where he's going next. And that's I always, and like, anyone who's Canadian who's listening to this will remember that show as a kid. And that's kind of like, I just hope to go into these places, and I know, it's different type of work, right? Because you make an impact, but you're not there every day, but you hope you inspire some different thinking. And it's like, oh, where's George going next? Kind of like that Littlest Hobo. Like, there's like a little theme song with it. I used to love that show as a kid. So that's like the best analogy I could have for that, for the work.
I think of Pete's Dragon. Pete's Dragon. I don't know if you ever saw that movie when you were a kid, Pete's Dragon, but the dragon is kind of the same analogy where the dragon goes and helps kids that are in trouble, and then finds the kid, the kid gets a family, and then the dragon moves on and goes and helps a new kid. And it's, I think that's a great analogy. What we don't have a ton of time left. I'm curious to know this, and I don't know if you have any, but like, what's one struggle that you've had in your life? Have you had any struggles or any obstacles that you've overcome?
Like one today?
Not today, but like bigger picture.
I give you, like, I've had struggles in my life.
Other than a bad hair day, other than that.
No, I think I think for a lot of people that are in education, there's always a struggle. Are you making a difference in the work that you're doing? Are you making an impact, right? And it's something I think about quite a bit, and I work to do. And for me, the way that I deal with that is I try to learn. I try to continuously learn and push myself and do things that I'm uncomfortable with, because it opens my eyes. I think it not only pushes me to continuously grow, to try to stay relevant in, I don't even want to say the field of education, but just in the world of learning, right? And really push myself to grow. But I think that when we do things that we're uncomfortable with, it creates an empathy and understanding. People trying to do something for the first time that you have down a pat, right? That you're comfortable with, right? Like, I'm pretty sure, you say like, oh, you just turn on a mic and whatever in podcast, but I guarantee at the beginning of this is a much different experience for you now than it was when you started, right? It's probably much easier, much more comfortable. But whereas I'm like, actually, like, I'm starting to do some podcasting myself, and I'll tell you, it's hard. Like, it's a hard thing to do and understand. And I used to be in the mentality is like, if you're not doing what I'm doing, like, you're becoming irrelevant. And I don't think that way anymore. I think really you lead by actions, you lead by doing stuff, but you also lead with empathy. And one of the things I say to people is, how do you move from your point A to your point B? Is that it's not about you getting to where I expect you to be. It's about me understanding where you are to help you move forward. And I think a lot of times, obviously I've kind of talked about a little bit, like, I struggle with things like anxiety and things like that. And, I think a lot of it is pertaining to wanting to do really well in your work and wanting to really help people and make an impact.
Yeah.
And so, it's something you do, but I think that, and it's kind of like we were talking about earlier. I try to utilize that, my anxiety and my struggle with things, to have a deeper empathy for others who are maybe in different places. Like I believe there are things that I can do probably better than you, Brian, and I guarantee there's things you do way better than me. And I think we have to start looking at each other for that, and really trying to understand people and try to bring out what their talents are, what their gifts are. And I think that having things like dealing with anxiety and stuff like that actually makes me much more empathetic to others, and hopefully a better leader because of it.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I tell teachers, look, I say to them when I'm doing a presentation, I say, look, let's be clear. Your job is way harder than mine. I say, you guys have a way harder job in the sense that if you look at it, you guys have to teach different lessons every day to the same kids and be phenomenal, right? Whereas I often can teach the same lesson multiple days to different people. So I make very clear, your job is harder than mine. And then I tell them, that said, there is one part of my job that's way harder than yours. And the part of my job that's way harder than theirs is I only get one day, sometimes 1 hour to 2 hours to connect to my audience. And if I don't connect to my audience early and fast, I'm going to lose them. And if I lose them, I don't have tomorrow to get them back. They have 179 more days to get their audience back. I have no ability to lose them. And the amount of anxiety that alone creates for me sometimes when I go in, because I'm sitting there like, I got to do this and I have to nail this. If I don't nail this, there is no tomorrow in this, and it's a different level for me of feeling like, part of me loves it. I love that challenge. I love that, getting out there, and it's like, you get one shot, Eminem said, you can only get one shot, and and here you go. But the anxiety that a lot of people think, we get up there and we talk and we're confident, and it's not for me. It's not that way at all. I am incredibly nervous. I am incredibly anxious. My palms sweat. I've learned how to handle that, no question, but I've had to work at that. I remember early in my career when I was first starting off, and I don't know if you've ever done this, where you're in the middle of a presentation, you completely forget what you're talking about. And that happened. Like, I literally completely forgot. And I was brand new. It was probably my second time I had ever been up in front of people, and I panicked. I literally panicked. And I started looking around, and I was like, I had a panic attack, and I sat down. I actually sat down on the floor, and I said, that's it, I'm done. And we actually ended the presentation. It was awful. It was one of the worst. I was almost done. I almost never went beyond that moment because it was so awful. And then I learned. So then I learned from somebody that I trusted, who was like, listen, when that happens again, just go with it. Just look at the audience and say, hey guys, right now, I totally forgot where I was. Does that ever happen to you guys? I guarantee you've been in the classroom sometimes. You forget where you're going, right? And they all nod, right? Because they've all been there a million times. And then I say, and the worst is when you look at your class and you're like, guys, where was I? And the whole class is like, I don't remember. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention at all. And literally, like, nobody was listening. But usually by doing that, by the time you get to the end of doing that, you'll remember where you were, or you at least have an idea of where you're going back to. But it's constantly learning, it's constantly growing, constantly getting better. And I feel like as long as we do that in all aspects of life, usually good things happen. And that's always my end message with tough kids. You're, as a teacher, you just want to grow. You just want to learn from this. You just want to realize that this was a really challenging situation. And now next time this happens, you know what to do, or you know what not to do. Next time to back off, or next time, just get a little closer to that kid. And one of the things you said earlier was was about kids taking it out on you when they don't really think when it's not really you, right? It's something else in their life. And, and one of my other lines that I love is if you can stay personally connected to kids without taking personally what they do and say. So you're staying connected, but you're not in the moment. You're not taking it personally. And you're remembering that some of these kids are coming from a world where I know you said we're about the same age. I'm 43. We're in 43 years of my life. They've been through more than I have at the age of 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I remember that, and you said it, lead with compassion, lead with kindness, you can't go wrong. You're still going to have bad days. You're still going to have struggles, but you can't go wrong. Any last nugget for people? What's one piece of great advice that you could give somebody out there?
Well, I'm gonna build on share a little speaker story for you. And actually, you probably know. I think it's called. Is it NYSCATE? Is that like a New York, NYSCATE? It's like a tech conference in New York.
I don't do tech, so I almost never do tech conferences. I don't know what that is, but I'm not a tech guy. I podcast, but I hit record. That's about it.
Yeah, it's a New York State conference. It's pretty well known, and actually this will tie into like kind of my last piece of advice. I was actually asked to, and I was just like starting to blog, starting to tweet, and they actually asked me, they said, and I was going to Greece with my brother. It's, my family's from Greece, and they came here after the World War II and the Greek Civil War. We were going to visit family, and they said, hey, we want you to do a session at NYSCATE, but we're not going to like bring you in or anything like that. We just want you to do it over video. And so you're going to video in. And so I was like, I was just so excited. So I was actually at this trip to Greece planned. I cut it short so I could come home for this session. And I remember, so all this stuff we had to set up to do it, it's not like you just Skype in at the time. It was whatever. And so they turn it on, the session, I'm like expecting all these people. And there is 2 people in a room, and that's it. And it's just like me and these 2 people with a video camera. And so I start talking, and literally 2 minutes in, one of them gets up and leaves. So it's just me talking to a guy. And this is like one of my first sessions I've ever done. And I'll tell you, I did like an amazing session for this one person, right? And so for me, like a lot of times we see, the product of something, people know you from like your speaking events and things like that. But people don't see like the struggles that we had to get to a certain point. But I'll tell you that every single time I've been blessed to be able to speak to people, I do the absolute best I can. And I'm just so appreciative, because I know that a lot of times there's so many incredible educators out there that, have personal stuff that they're going through or whatever. And they show up and they just do absolutely amazing things with kids. And so I've always been inspired by that. And I try to do my best every opportunity that, especially when that one teacher's time to me was extremely valuable. I wasn't like, you know what, let's just quit this, right? That person was there. I think that person stayed because they felt so horrible, because like basically if they left, the presentation was
talking
over.
to the wall.
Yeah, the presentation's over, right? Like that guy had so much control. But yeah, I just, that person stayed, and I wanted to make sure that I did the best I could for that person, because I know that they've done that probably 100 times that week for kids when the circumstances were not ideal for them. So
it's so hard to do those. It's so hard. The video conferences are hard because I just did one yesterday. I literally just did one yesterday. I had 2 schools from Georgia on, and so I've got this setup in here where I am, where it's cool. I got a TV over here, and I've got this system that actually I can stand over there and I can move, and it tracks me. So I can literally, it's like I'm in a real room. But I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, especially now, right? So, I mean, now this is going to air after the new year, but we're actually recording this before Christmas, and this is the week before Christmas. So people are just done. I mean, they're just checked out. And so now you're trying to do a staff meeting. They're like, who is this dude? And what is he, right? And it literally, so I could see it. I could see them in the corner. So I got both of them up, and so I asked them, I said, can you guys just mute your microphone? Because it was like full blown conversations. And I was trying to be laser focused on my camera so that I can see just so that I'm not seeing everything else going on. The most I don't know if you have ever had any embarrassing moments. The most embarrassing one I ever had was my fly was down in front of like 600 people. It was awful. And it was this lady. So this lady, I'm presenting, this lady is trying to hand me a note, literally and I'm looking at her like, what's going on? And she's trying to give me this note, and I'm just kind of, and finally she hands me the note, and I open it right in front of everybody, and it says, "Your fly's down." And so I just look up at the whole room, and I just smiled at them, and I was like, "You guys know you were all looking. Stop looking. Stop." And they all just started laughing. I'm like, "How are you guys gonna not tell me? Like, all of you gonna sit there and not tell me?" Anyway, crazy, right? The things that happen. Have you ever had any embarrassing moments or none?
Well, I think talking to one person for an hour over is pretty. It was like basically, if it was a podcast,
and you had no idea. You had no idea that it was going to be that. You're like geared up for this whole big thing, and one person.
Yeah, I thought it was just going to be this packed auditorium, right? Because I never had presented ever in my life. That was like my first time ever, and it was two people, and one's like, moat.
Phenomenal.
This is no good. And they I just remember them sitting like one chair away from each other, like what do we do here? This is super awkward. No one else has showed up, so yeah.
It's cool though. You can get good experience. I mean, even if the one guy left, you could have just talked and pretended and gotten your work in, sort of. It's like shooting threes by yourself. It's like that's when you put the work in. So that during game time you're ready to go. Listen, man, it was fun. So before we wrap up, you probably don't know about this, but I have on my website, brianmendler.com, I have a subscription service that people can sign up for. So it costs $5 a month, and there's over 70 videos. And what I do is on each podcast, I do a bonus segment with every guest where we answer a question. So I get about 25 to 30 questions a week between Instagram and Twitter about people's difficult kids. And I always pick one, I read it, and then I'll answer it. But would you mind staying on with me and answering it with me? All right, I'm going to read the question right now just so people know the one. And again, I don't like, but I do this to everyone. I know it's kind of rude, but you don't know the question. So I haven't told you the question ahead of time. So
you told me, I thought you told me 3 hours ago. I've been preparing all. I did an essay. I've already blogged it out, tweeted people answers.
So this is a good one. This is a good one. So it says, "Hi, Brian. I saw you speak last year in Chicago. I took a lot away. I've been sharing it with my coworkers. This year, I'm in my 6th year teaching and dealing with a tough situation. I have a student going through something tough at home, and child services are involved. The student is acting out really badly, pushing boundaries in my classroom. I know it's most of it is for a reaction. I'm trying to constantly be positive. The minute I correct her, she snaps. I have her on a behavior plan that focuses on goals. I'm at a loss right now for what to do currently because it feels like I'm walking on eggshells around her. I was just curious if you had any advice." So we're gonna wrap this up. Then we're gonna start another one, and we'll get into this question a little bit there. All right, man.
You got it.
It was awesome. I appreciate you doing this so much.
Thanks. Awesome.